Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Razan Pereira. An influential Democratic Congressman on Tuesday apologized to India's US envoy for President Donald Trump's embarrassing remarks on Kashmir, while several others came out in support of New Delhi's stand against any third-party role on the issue of Kashmir. I just apologized to Indian Ambassador Harsh Shringla for Trump's amateurish and embarrassing mistake, Congressman Brad Sherman tweeted hours after Donald Trump's stunning claim that Prime Minister Narendra Modi sought his mediation or arbitration efforts to resolve the Kashmir issue. India was quick to reject Donald Trump's claims. For the past 70 years, India has consistently resisted any third-party mediation proposal. And for over a decade now, the US has been reiterating that Kashmir is a bilateral issue. In a joint statement, Congressman George Holding and Congressman Brad Sherman, who are co-chairs of Congressional Caucus on India and Indian Americans, asserted that Kashmir is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Kashmir issue and India's stand on the matter. Joining me on the program today are Sushil Pandit, social activist, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Editor of the Hindustan Times, and Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, former ambassador. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. What are your thoughts on President Trump's statement on Kashmir?
Well, this is not the first time, and I doubt if it will be the last time that the US President Donald Trump makes some kind of outlandish statement on television, leaving it to his professionals in whichever department of the US government is involved with that statement to do damage control or set the record straight. In this particular instance, I think what could have been a bombshell kind of announcement was so utterly and totally at variance with the reality, and that it turned out to be a damn squib, and that too very quickly, with India rejecting that. I hate to second guess it. My sort of informed opinion would be, given again Trump's record over the last couple of years, would be that certainly Kashmir would have been mentioned by our Prime Minister. It would have been extremely strange if he hadn't mentioned Kashmir, but in the context of cross-border terrorism from Pakistan into Kashmir across the line of control and the international border and so on, which in a combination of fantasizing and believing it to be the reality led to the statement that President Trump made. But I also feel that it is really the end of that matter with the statements that have come out of the US and with the track record of the US president being what it is. I doubt if it's at the moment more than a storm in a teacup, and the storm has actually subsided.
Right. So, Pramit, that having been said, what do you think prompted President Trump to come out and make the statement?
Well, as we mentioned, if you look at the past record of Trump, he has positioned himself, he has this belief that he is a perfect mediator for any international dispute. He has offered himself as a solution to the Arab-Israeli problem. He has offered himself as a solution to the Korean dispute, which he continues to pursue. And even in the past, he has mentioned that I can solve the problems between India and Pakistan. In fact, on any international dispute that is raised before him, he says that I'm the guy who can solve it. This is part
Brexit.
Including Brexit. He's basically a narcissist. He believes that he can charm anybody. He just has to meet that person face to face. Even in his present dispute with Iran, he has said, I would like to meet Rouhani. And Rouhani and I will just sit down and have a chat and resolve everything. So this is his fundamental way of, he believes diplomacy should work, that he can just talk to anybody and it'll be resolved. And as I said before, he said this in Kashmir. The sense is that what is driving some of this is his desperate desire to win the Nobel Peace Prize, because Obama won the Peace Prize, and therefore he believes that he should also get one as well. And it is a personal obsession that he has. So he doesn't bother to do any research in any of these issues. He has no concept of the problems or the actual realities of these issues. He's put his own son-in-law in charge of the Middle East peace process, which has immediately died as a consequence. So in my sense is that this is something, and Imran Khan, by prompting him on this issue, and you see the transcript, Imran keeps pressing him, you're the man who can resolve this, we need your guidance and so on. This brings out exactly the kind of narcissism that you expect from Trump. And so he immediately says, yes, I spoke with Modi, and he also said the same thing. Now, what is interesting is you read the transcript a little bit later, Trump himself retracts a bit by saying, I think that's what Modi would like me to do. Where he gets into this issue of what he would like versus what actually happened, sort of merge together in the world of Trumpian whatever fantasy and reality, and so I think we can be pretty confident that Modi did not say this, and Trump is just merely projecting himself into a scenario where he believes he can be this great peacemaker, and therefore at some point also win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Right. So that having been said, Sushil Pandit, I'm going to take off from where Pramit just left. Is Pakistan at the end of the day, trying to play a dirty game by trying somebody else to get involved in the Kashmir issue desperately?
They've been at it for a long time. They have always tried doing this, despite signing off on Shimla Agreement and agreeing to the fact that it's a bilateral issue. They've left no opportunity raising it at United Nations, any forum, you name it. They got Organization of Islamic Countries to actually appoint an envoy on Kashmir. So they have been trying hard to internationalize this issue, and even in Kashmir, their own proteges egged them on. On the eve of his visit, Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani actually tweeted imploring him to go and raise this with Trump. He said so in as many words in his tweet. So perhaps there is an opinion within Pakistan and the Pakistan within India in Kashmir that perhaps America could arm twist us, like they think it has been doing for some time, to make some concessions. And because we have sometimes given in to pressure, made concessions, it seems that they think even the present government can be pushed around and made to give some concessions in Kashmir to Pakistan, resume dialogue, go easy as far as handling terror is concerned, and so on and so forth. But it seems it's not going to work, try as they may. And as Ambassador Mukherjee said, perhaps this will continue even in future, even if they don't meet with success in this attempt. This will carry on, and we'll have to make sure that we do not cross the red lines that we've drawn ourselves. Very often that's where we are found wanting, when we say that we are not going to talk and then we look tentative about it. When we contemplate certain measures and then we back off. So it is up to us how we deal with this.
All right, so we have to be firm and strong is what you're suggesting. So Ambassador, you mentioned in your opening remark how India immediately rejected this and said,
Right.
there's no truth in what President Trump has said. But what was another aspect of it was we saw several congressmen from the United States also come out immediately and apologize and say there's no truth to it. I don't know why President Donald Trump has done this and so on and so forth. Were you surprised at that at all? With the kind of reaction that we got from the United States?
Not really, because our position on the Kashmir issue being, the India-Pakistan imbroglio has to be sorted out bilaterally is extremely well known, and the State Department and all those aware of international relations, especially in South Asia, in Congress, in the media, those who follow this as part of their profession, there's absolutely no doubt about India's stand on third-party mediation, that we're against it, and that we've had enough, our experience in the past, way back in the past, and our stand on the Shimla Declaration, Shimla Agreement and the Lahore Declaration and so on. So I frankly had expected that very soon there would be critical voices, particularly from Democratic congressmen, and that there would be a clarification from the State Department, which has come, including from the White House. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that this was going to happen, considering the kind of statement that the president made. It was not an ambiguous, woolly kind of statement. It was frankly weird, but it was very clear, and it had to be rejected outright quite soon by both sides.
Absolutely. So Pramit, does this leave the US establishment in a tough spot now going forward in trying to deal with India?
Well, not really, because as I've mentioned, Trump has this habit of throwing these things out, not just on India, but almost on any foreign policy issue. And his government then rowing it back and then just quietly ignoring this. So you saw recently, for example, he said American companies could now supply material to Huawei, the Chinese telecom company, which had been blacklisted. Immediately the White House and the Department of Commerce and everybody said, actually, despite the president's comments, no American company will be allowed to sell anything to Huawei. And not you just meant the congressman, the White House, the State Department, both issued statements immediately after the president's statement saying, we understand that Kashmir is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. We are happy to help if anybody asks us to, but they make it very clear that they understand that the original policy position of India remains unchanged. They couldn't obviously contradict their own president directly, but they come as close as you possibly could at an official level to say that did not happen. I should also note the Heritage Foundation, which is the Republican think tank that is closest to Trump. Their South Asia analyst went public and said Modi did not ask for mediation. He went public and he said, you can quote me. And I know this person has a direct link into the White House, and he said this is simply untrue.
Right. So let's now try and understand, Sushil, as the history of the Kashmir issue. Now, have attempts been made in the past by third parties to try and get involved and try and sort out this particular issue? And how has India reacted in the past to something like this?
See, not in the recent past. And if I go slight amount of distance, the last time there was a high-profile third-party mediation was after 1965 war. And these were hosted in Tashkent, and our Prime Minister there had to give away Haji Pir, and we were coerced into giving it back. I don't think ever since we've had any international mediation formally of that kind of a profile with Pakistan, somebody else coming in and playing arbiter. So this is, and this has been post-71 very steadfastly adhered to. Informally, people nudging is another matter. We saw that in Kargil conflict, where a role was played by the American president. Bill Clinton very clearly asked Pakistan to vacate, and they had to. But it wasn't a formal, structured kind of dialogue. I mean, people do put in a word, and this is never acknowledged formally, officially, but then we get to know. So this kind of informal nudging, suggesting will always go on. But getting someone to actually come and mediate and negotiate, I don't think that has happened ever.
Right. So taking the discussion forward now, Ambassador, of what interest is Kashmir to the rest of the world?
Well, if you're talking of the rest of the world in terms of, what gets out into the global media and so on and so forth, Kashmir is of interest only when events there lead to some kind of crisis or violence or, some kind of conflict between India and Pakistan or an act of terrorism that is big, that hits the world press. Apart from that, in my interactions with foreign officers of various countries, when the Indian or the Pakistani ambassador or the political officer walks in to give his latest briefing on Kashmir, they sort of roll their eyes. Here we go again. So and that is the same. Incidentally, that's not a kind of specific lack of interest in Kashmir. That is the same with countries who are just concentrating on getting on with life and do not want to get involved in something in which they have no role. And arising out of that, those who do have a possible role, like for instance the US, like China, which is very much ranged on Pakistani side, the US, which is a superpower, which has a great deal of influence in Pakistan and a great deal of influence around the world. Yes, I would agree with Mr. Pandit that behind the scenes there have been nudging, a bit of friendly advice, but not, maybe friendly, but with a lot of seriousness behind it. But I don't think there has ever been any sustained attempt at honing in on the situation and trying to push India into, let's say, going beyond its stated position, like open up a dialogue again with Pakistan, which is the current kind of thing. Because I think, to put it very simply, India's position is far too well known. Two, Pakistan has lost a huge amount of sympathy throughout the world, wherever even it exists, even in the Arab world, because of its more or less open and brazen support of terrorism and its use of terrorism as a state policy. It's even lost sympathy in those areas in the United States with whom it had nurtured a careful relationship, especially the military, because of its acts in Afghanistan, its double-faced actions in Afghanistan vis-a-vis America. And thirdly, because and that's an internal situation as far as India is concerned, we can be pretty stubborn on issues which are of great importance to us. I mean, if you look at the track record on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, on 1971 and Bangladesh, on certain things, India is pretty mulish, and this is one such thing, and the world recognizes it.
Absolutely. So, Pramit, where does this leave President Trump, and what happens to the equation that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump share? Does this in any way come in between that?
I doubt it. As I said, Trump has a habit of throwing these oddball statements out, and then he himself seems to forget about them a few weeks later, particularly when the rest of his bureaucracy then comes in and says that, Mr. President, this is not actually what our policy is. And as I mentioned, even in his own statement to Imran Khan, he seemed to start to walk back from that original view that Modi actually wanted him to do, to mediate. So my sense is that this will blow over, and I've said he's mentioned offered to mediate on Kashmir a number of times before, and nobody has paid the slightest bit of attention, including within his own government. So my sense is that the US-India relationship continues to be stable. The only real source of contention right now is the increasing number of trade disputes we have, which need resolution. On the defense side and in many other areas, I think we see actually a fair degree of convergence increasing. And my understanding of this government, especially in the second term, Modi plans to continue to expand his relationship with the United States on a whole host of fronts. But the trade one is the real issue that the Indian government is most concerned about. Trump himself will, by February next year, be fully into the US re-election campaign. And I doubt foreign policy will be much of an issue at all, because it rarely is in a US election.
So is it safe to say then this is a forgotten chapter now? Since you've got clarifications from both sides?
It won't be forgotten, but it'll become a footnote.
Okay, all right. So that having been said, Sushil Pandit, so as far as India is concerned and as far as Kashmir is concerned, how do we sort out this problem of Kashmir? Because it's a long-standing one. We've seen several people trying to get involved, but India has been firm, saying that no third-party intervention. What should our focus be?
That's a big one.
Right.
Kashmir has two very clear dimensions. The internal dimension in Kashmir needs a bit of a political will. And of course, understanding. Though most of it is already there, those who are at the helm more or less know what they are dealing with in Kashmir. But to get into it, roll up the sleeves and do what is needed would take some will take some courage. Till then, this ongoing approach of managing the problem will continue, and that will keep the status quo. Because of the lack of will, you won't take tough decisions, it will not move towards resolution. It will only buy piecemeal peace for a few weeks and months, and then it will be back to square one. So that is the internal dimension as far as Kashmir is concerned. You know how to sort it out, you know who to go after, you know what to change in the statute, you know what to implement on ground. The point is, when would you like to do it, despite such a mandate that you've got for change?
Is this the best time?
There wasn't a better time ever. I don't think there's going to be a better time. Well, I can speculate, but going forward, you will never get this kind of an opportunity. The legitimacy that you enjoy thanks to the mandate, the will of the people expressed through the majority you have, is unequivocal, is unmistakable. You have to go for it now, before other priorities take over and other factors begin to dilute your focus. The outside dimension is Pakistan. Again, there doesn't seem to be a will to sort it out nice and proper. We are still responding, we are still reacting to what they do. They set the agenda, they up the ante, and we go about responding to it.
But what about Balakot and other such examples?
It was a response to Pulwama. Strikes were a response to Uri. The point is, when will we start proactively putting a squeeze on Pakistan? Today they are in an economic distress. We are a large economy by their side. Can we put a squeeze on an already tottering economy, making it more difficult for them? There doesn't seem to be any action plan, at least not visible. Nobody seems to be talking about it. How do we make life more difficult for them? How do we get them to pay the price, face the consequences of what they're doing to us for the last so many decades? We still are a little iffy about it, and I hope that changes, because such opportunities do not come too often.
Right.
And this is the time to actually go ahead and do things that we've been waiting for.
Okay, closing comments now from all my guests with the best way forward, starting first with you, Ambassador.
You're talking of Kashmir?
On the Kashmir issue, the best, and of course dealing with a state like Pakistan on the border.
Well, if there's any subject on which the best political minds of this country have concentrated on, and all our security experts and just about everyone who has any opinion on it, is Kashmir. I would be utterly and totally arrogant if I offered a solution. I find myself in broad agreement with Sushil that by and large over the last many years, no matter what has been stated by various governments, the fact is that we have been in fact managing the situation. There has not been a stated clear-cut objective beyond our repeating that it's an integral part of India. The whole of Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. I can only point out that there are till today deep divisions within those who, of different governments, those who address the Kashmir problem, starting from internally, starting from prioritizing hearts and minds over the muscular option, and all that follows from that, and the local and the various dimensions of the local politics in the valley. That's one thing. The other thing is, as far as Pakistan is concerned, we all know where opinion goes up and down about dialogue, about one side, to put it simply, one kind of feeling that they will never change. Pakistan will never change, and therefore a very tough kind of position, inflexible position, is the only way to deal with that state which is ruled by a military establishment which will simply not change. And on the other hand, various others who take the other point of view that this is a neighbor which is there geographically, it's not going to go away, and eventually as far as Kashmir is concerned, they do become an interlocutor.
Right.
I don't have an answer. I think I simply would want our government to take, as Sushil said, a kind of prepare a policy which has bipartisan support throughout the country.
Absolutely.
And then go ahead with
whatever has to be done.
whatever has to be done, keeping in mind, and here I show my bias, keeping in mind that you're dealing with the citizens of your own country. That fact should not be forgotten.
Right, absolutely. Pramit?
I'll just say something more on the Trump statement. I think one way we may find this to have been a blessing in disguise, because post-Balakot, there was a move and there was a growing momentum in the European Union and in Britain, and even in China. You may remember Xi Jinping surprised Modi at the SCO summit by suddenly saying, "Why don't you please hold a dialogue with Pakistan," which Modi then rejected. That after Balakot, that they should slowly pressure India into coming to some sort of a dialogue, not necessarily mediating process, but the idea that force India to go into a dialogue with Pakistan. And India had made it very clear that we are not going to do that unless there was some major action against terrorists within Pakistan. Trump, by suddenly sort of in many ways pushing this out into the open and having India basically puncture this very quickly, we may have given ourselves the ability to ignore other requests later on this issue, because if they saw the strength of India's response to Trump, what would we therefore respond to, let's say, from Brussels, an institution we don't particularly care much about on foreign policy issues?
Absolutely. And Sushil Pandit, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Yeah, see, I would like to cite this example of 1971, when India decisively acted and broke Pakistan into two. That's when Sheikh Abdullah came to realize that the very basis on which he was challenging Indian state through a plebiscite front was gone. And he sued for peace with Mrs. Gandhi, got into an accord, was made chief minister without even fighting an election. That must tell us that Pakistan is the nub of the problem. The day we sort it out and then not commit blunders for its reincarnation a few years later, that's where lies the key to a lot of issues in Kashmir. Because currently Pakistan is propping up most of the issues in Kashmir, militarily, politically, financially, through terror, arms, whatever. And once that very base is knocked off and Pakistan is sorted out nice and proper, a lot in Kashmir would be possible, and you will have the ways to go about it.
All right. On that note, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.